The cargo ship Aurora's Pride drifted through the black void of space, its hull scarred from countless trips between the outer colonies. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his worn command chair, watching the stars through the main view screen. The ship wasn't much to look at, but it had been his home for the past 8 years. Every dent and scratch told a story of hard work and survival in the dangerous frontier regions. "Captain, we're approaching the Kepler Junction," said Amy Watson, from the communications station. Her voice carried the steady calm of someone who had spent years in space. At 28, she was the youngest member of the crew, but her quick mind and steady nerves had earned her the respect of everyone. Aboard, Jake nodded and stretched his arms above his head. The journey from the mining colonies had been long and boring, exactly the way he liked it. Boring meant safe, and safe meant his crew would make it home to their families. "Good work, Amy. Lisa, what's our status?" Lisa Carter looked up from her station, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. As first officer, she kept track of everything that happened on the ship. "All systems running normal, Captain. Danny says the engines are purring like a happy cat. We should reach the jump point in 6 hours. Excellent." Jake allowed himself a small smile. This run had gone perfectly. They had delivered mining equipment to 3 different colonies and picked up a cargo of rare metals that would fetch a good price back on Earth. His crew would earn enough to take a real vacation. When they got home, the Aurora's Pride was not a warship. It was a simple cargo vessel built for moving goods between the human colonies scattered across this part of the galaxy. The crew of 12 included miners, traders, and engineers who had chosen the hard life of space because they wanted freedom. More than comfort. They were good people, Jake thought, the kind who would share their last meal with a stranger. Danny Rodriguez climbed up from the engine room, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. The stocky engineer had worked on everything from mining robots to star freighters, and there wasn't a machine made that he couldn't fix. "Captain, the hyperdrive is ready for the jump whenever you give the word." "Thanks, Danny. We'll make the jump in a few hours. Why don't you grab some coffee and rest?" Jake knew his crew had been working hard, and they deserved a break. The peaceful moment was shattered when Amy's console started beeping wildly. She bent over her instruments, her face growing pale. "Captain, I'm picking up a large ship on sensors." "It's big, really big." Jake felt his stomach tighten. Large ships in the border regions usually meant trouble. "Can you identify it?" "Working on it." Amy's fingers flew over her controls. "Oh no, Captain, it's a Zephyrian dreadnought. The computer says it's the Void Render." The bridge fell silent. Everyone had heard stories about the Zephyrians and their expanding empire. They were a warrior race that had conquered dozens of worlds, and their technology was far ahead of anything humans possessed. The Void Render was one of their largest warships, capable of destroying an entire fleet. Lisa moved to the tactical station, though they all knew the Aurora's Pride had no weapons worth mentioning. "Captain, they're moving to intercept us." "We can't outrun them." Jake's mind raced through their options. They could try to hide, but their cargo ship was too big and too slow. They could try to fight, but it would be like throwing rocks at a battleship. "Amy, open a channel." "Maybe we can talk our way out of this." "Channel open, Captain." Jake stood up and straightened his uniform. He had to project calm confidence, even though his heart was pounding. "This is Captain Jake Morrison, of the human cargo vessel Aurora's Pride. We are on a peaceful trading mission. Please state your intentions." The response came quickly, in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "Human vessel, this is Commander Vextel of the Zephyrian Empire. You will submit to scanning and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will result in your destruction." Jake looked at his crew. Danny's jaw was tight with anger. Lisa had her hand on her sidearm, though it would be useless against Zephyrian armor. Amy was pale but steady, ready to follow whatever orders he gave. These were his people, and he would not let them be taken without a fight. "Commander Vextel, we are simple merchants carrying mining equipment and raw materials. We have no weapons and pose no threat to your empire. We request safe passage to continue our journey." There was a long pause. Jake could imagine the alien commander studying his ship, trying to decide if they were worth the trouble. Finally, the grinding voice returned. You will be scanned. Do not move. The Aurora's pride shuddered as invisible beams swept over the hull. Jake had heard about Zephyrian scanning technology. It could see through solid metal, analyze every component, and even detect the thoughts of living beings. The scan lasted for several minutes, and Jake felt exposed, as if alien eyes were looking into his soul. Interesting, came the voice of Commander Vextel. Your species appears to be quite primitive. Basic technology, simple weapons, weak physical capabilities. You will make suitable subjects for study. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Commander, we are not subjects. We are free beings conducting lawful trade. We demand safe passage under the laws of space. The alien's laughter was like breaking glass. Laws? You speak of laws to the Zephyrian Empire? We make the laws in this region of space. Your scan results show you are no threat to us. You are weak, slow, and poorly equipped. You will surrender your vessel immediately. Lisa stepped forward, her hand moving to her weapon. Captain, we can't. Let them take us. You know what happens to prisoners of the Zephyrian Empire? Jake nodded grimly. The stories were not pleasant. The Zephyrians saw other species as either useful slaves or interesting specimens for their scientists. Neither option was acceptable. Commander Vextel, I must respectfully decline your offer. We are peaceful traders, but we will not surrender. Our freedom, you refuse? The alien's voice carried surprise and amusement. You are even more primitive than our scans indicated. Very well, you will learn the price of defying the Zephyrian Empire. The communication channel went dead. Jake looked at his crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his heart. They were outgunned, outnumbered, and probably going to die. But they were not going to go quietly. Amy, send out a distress signal on all human frequencies. Danny, I need you to tell me what kind of weapons we can make from our cargo. Lisa, arm the crew with whatever we have. Captain, Danny said, his voice steady despite the circumstances. We've got mining charges, industrial lasers, and a whole lot of heavy equipment. I can make some things that might surprise our visitors, Jake smiled grimly. The Zephyrians had scanned his ship and seen only what they expected to see. A weak cargo vessel with primitive humans? They had no idea what they were really dealing with. Humans didn't surrender easily, and they had a talent for turning anything into a weapon when their backs were against the wall. All right, people. They want to board us? Let's give them a welcome they'll never forget. The Aurora's pride might not look like much, but it was crewed by humans. And humans, Jake thought, were about to show the Zephyrian Empire exactly what kind of species they had chosen to anger. The Aurora's pride shook violently as the Zephyrian electromagnetic pulse hit the ship. All the lights went out at once, leaving the crew in complete darkness. Emergency power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in a dim red glow. The ship's engines died with a low whine, and Jake felt the familiar sensation of artificial gravity fluctuating. Report! Jake called out, gripping his command chair as the ship continued to shake. Main power is down, Danny's voice came over. The intercom from the engine room. They hit us with some kind of pulse weapon. I can get emergency power running, but the main engines are dead. We're drifting. Lisa checked her instruments with a small flashlight. Hull integrity is holding, but we've lost navigation and communications. They disabled us without destroying us. Amy worked frantically at her station, trying to restore communications. I'm getting some short-range systems back online, Captain. The distress signal got out before they hit us. Jake nodded, though he knew help was unlikely to arrive in time. The Zephyrians had played this perfectly. They had disabled the Aurora's pride without damaging it too badly, which meant they planned to board and take prisoners. The thought made his blood run cold. Through the main view screen, they could see the massive shape of the void render moving closer. The Zephyrian dreadnought was 3 times the size of their cargo ship, its hull covered in weapon ports and scanner arrays. It looked like a predator moving in for the kill. Captain, Lisa said quietly, boarding pods are launching from The dreadnought? 6 of them, coming in fast. Jake felt his heart pounding, but his voice remained steady. All right, people, this is it. Danny, what do you have for me? Danny's voice crackled over the intercom. I've been thinking about this, Captain. We've got 20 tons of mining charges in Cargo Bay 2. High explosive stuff meant for blasting through solid rock. I can rig some of them as improvised grenades. What about the mining lasers? Industrial grade, Captain. They're designed to cut through metal and stone. Not exactly weapons, but they'll do damage if we can get close enough, Jake thought quickly. The Zephyrians were expecting to board a helpless cargo ship full of frightened humans. They had no idea what they were walking into. Do it, Danny. Lisa, I need you to organize the crew. Get everyone armed with whatever we can find. Already on it, Captain. Lisa was moving through the ship, speaking to each crew member in turn. Pete, grab those plasma torches from the workshop. Maria, you take the welding equipment. If they want to board us, we're going to make them pay for every step. The crew of the Aurora's Pride had not been soldiers, but they were frontier people. They had survived in the harsh environment of space for years, dealing with equipment failures, asteroid storms, and pirate attacks. Each of them had faced death before and lived to tell about it. Amy managed to restore internal communications and began coordinating the defense. Boarding pods will hit us in 3 minutes, Captain. They're aiming for the main airlocks and cargo bays. Jake moved through the ship, checking on his crew. In the cargo bay, Danny was working with controlled explosives, his steady hands preparing charges that could kill Zephyrian soldiers. The stocky engineer had served in the military years ago, and his old training was coming back quickly. These mining charges pack a serious punch, Danny explained as he worked. I'm setting them for remote detonation. We can use them to seal corridors or take out groups of boarders. Lisa had turned the crew quarters into an armory. The mining crew was checking their improvised weapons and discussing tactics. These weren't trained soldiers, but they were tough people who had learned to survive in hostile environments. Remember, Lisa told them, we know this ship better than they do. Use that advantage. Stay mobile, hit them hard, and don't let them pin you down. The first boarding pod hit the main airlock with a metallic clang that echoed through the ship. Jake could hear the sound of cutting equipment as the Zephyrians began breaking through the airlock door. More pods were hitting other parts of the ship, and soon they would be fighting on multiple fronts. Amy, kill the gravity in sections 1 through 4, Jake ordered. Let's see how well they fight when they're floating. Done, Captain. Also shutting down life support in those sections. They want to come aboard, they can bring their own air. The first group of Zephyrian soldiers broke through the main airlock, their armor gleaming in the dim emergency lighting. They were tall, reptilian creatures with advanced weapons and energy shields. Their scanner equipment told them the ship was lightly defended by primitive humans. What the scanners had not told them was that humans were unpredictable. The Zephyrians expected to find cowering prisoners. Instead, they walked into a trap. Danny had rigged a corridor with mining charges, and as soon as the soldiers were inside, he triggered the explosion. The blast sent the aliens flying, their shields flickering under the unexpected assault. Lisa and 3 crew members were waiting in the next corridor, armed with industrial plasma torches. The superheated beams could cut through Zephyrian armor, and the humans used their knowledge of the ship's layout to attack from unexpected angles. Jake led another group in the cargo bay, where more Zephyrians were trying to establish a foothold. The humans used the heavy cargo containers as shields, moving them with loading equipment to create cover. When the aliens advanced, they found themselves facing mining lasers and improvised explosives. This is not what the scans indicated. One of the Zephyrian soldiers spoke into his communicator. The humans are resisting with unexpected weapons. Commander Vextal's voice came back over the radio. They are primitives with basic technology. Overwhelm them with superior firepower. But the humans weren't fighting like primitives. They were using every advantage they could find. Amy had taken control of the ship's systems, venting atmosphere in some sections and flooding others with toxic gases from the mining equipment. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting not just humans, but the ship itself. Danny had turned the maintenance tunnels into a network of death traps. He crawled through spaces too small for the tall Zephyrians, setting charges and attacking from behind. His knowledge of explosives and ship systems made him a ghost that struck without warning. The battle was brutal and desperate. The Zephyrians had better weapons and armor, but the humans had something their scans had not detected: the will to fight for their freedom. They used every trick they knew, every piece of equipment they could find, and every advantage their home ground gave them. Lisa coordinated the defense with military precision, though she had never been a soldier. Her frontier upbringing had taught her to think fast and adapt to changing situations. She moved her people like pieces on a chessboard, always staying one step ahead of the alien invaders. After an hour of fighting, the Zephyrians had taken heavy casualties. Their advanced technology had not prepared them for an enemy that fought with such creativity and desperation. The humans were using tactics that seemed insane, but they were working. Commander Vextal watched the battle reports with growing frustration. His sensors had told him the humans were weak and poorly equipped, but his soldiers were dying and the cargo ship was still not secured. Something was very wrong with their intelligence. "Send more soldiers," he ordered, "and prepare the heavy weapons. These humans are more troublesome than expected." But Jake Morrison and his crew were just getting started. They had shown the Zephyrians that humans did not surrender easily. Now they were about to show them what happened when you threatened a human's home and family. The real fight was just beginning. The second wave of Zephyrian soldiers entered the Aurora's Pride with more caution than the first. They had learned that the human cargo ship was not the easy target their scans had promised. Bodies of their fallen comrades floated in the zero-gravity sections, and the corridors were filled with smoke from explosive charges. Commander Vextal studied the reports from his soldiers with growing confusion. The humans were supposed to be primitives with basic technology, yet they had killed or wounded half of his first boarding party using weapons that his scanners had not detected. "Report," he demanded from his squad leader. "The humans have turned their cargo into weapons," came the reply over the radio. "They are using mining equipment and industrial tools against us. They know their ship better than we do, and they are fighting from prepared positions." "They are cargo haulers," Vextal said with irritation. "Overwhelm them with numbers." But the humans were not behaving like cargo haulers. They were fighting like cornered animals, using every trick and tool at their disposal. Jake Morrison had turned his peaceful trading vessel into a fortress, and every room had become a battlefield. In the main cargo bay, Danny Rodriguez had created a maze of shipping containers and mining equipment. The heavy cargo loaders moved slowly but could crush a Zephyrian soldier like a tin can. He operated them by remote control, staying hidden in the maintenance shafts while his mechanical allies did the fighting. "Come on, you scaly bastards," Danny muttered as he watched 3 Zephyrian soldiers try to cross the cargo bay. With a press of a button, he sent a 10-ton container sliding across the floor. The aliens dove for cover, but one was too slow. The container hit him with a wet crunch, and his energy shield flickered and died. Lisa Carter had turned the crew quarters into a sniper's nest. She had found an old hunting rifle in one of the lockers, and while it was primitive compared to Zephyrian weapons, it was accurate. The aliens had to cross an open corridor to reach her position, and she made them pay for every step. "Amy, I need you to shut down the lights in Section 7, Lisa called over the intercom. "Done," Amy replied from the bridge. The corridor plunged into darkness, and Lisa switched to night vision goggles. The Zephyrians stumbled blindly while she picked them off one by one. Amy Watson had become the puppet master of the Aurora's Pride. From her position on the bridge, she controlled every system on the ship. She could vent atmosphere, change the gravity, alter the temperature, and even play music over the intercom to confuse the invaders. "Captain, I'm reading more boarding pods approaching," Amy reported. "They're sending reinforcements." Jake Morrison was in the thick of the fighting, leading a group of crew members in hand-to-hand combat. His mining laser had overheated, so he had picked up a plasma torch and was using it like a sword. The superheated beam could cut through Zephyrian armor, but he had to get close to use it. "Let them come," Jake said, ducking behind a bulkhead as enemy fire scorched the air above his head. "We'll give them the same warm welcome we gave the others." The humans were fighting with a creativity that the Zephyrians had never encountered. They used the ship's artificial gravity as a weapon, suddenly switching it on and off to send their enemies floating helplessly. They vented toxic gases from the mining equipment, forcing the aliens to rely on their suit filters. They even used the ship's fire suppression system to flood corridors with flame-retardant foam, but the most dangerous human was Danny Rodriguez. The engineer had disappeared into the maintenance tunnels that ran throughout the ship, and he was using his knowledge of explosives to devastating effect. He would plant charges in unexpected places, then detonate them when the Zephyrians passed by. He was like a ghost, striking without warning and vanishing before the aliens could respond. "Can't locate the human engineer," one of the Zephyrian soldiers reported. "He's using the ship's infrastructure against us." Danny was crawling through a ventilation shaft, carrying a bag of mining charges. Below him, a group of 6 Zephyrian soldiers was advancing down a corridor. He carefully placed explosive charges above their heads, then crawled to a safe distance. "This is for boarding my ship," he whispered, and pressed the detonator. The explosion brought down part of the ceiling, trapping the soldiers under twisted metal and debris. Danny smiled grimly and moved on to his next target. The battle had been raging for 3 hours, and the Zephyrians were starting to realize they had made a serious mistake. Their advanced technology was useless against enemies who fought with such desperate ingenuity. Every corridor was a trap, every room a potential ambush. Lisa had moved to a new position and was using a welding torch to seal blast doors behind the advancing aliens. When they tried to retreat, they found their escape routes cut off. She was herding them like sheep, driving them toward prepared kill zones where other crew members waited with improvised weapons. "Amy, can you give me control of the artificial gravity in Section 4? Lisa asked. "You got it," Amy replied. "What are you planning?" "Just watch and learn." Lisa waited until a group of Zephyrians was crossing a large open area, then suddenly increased the artificial gravity to 3 times normal. The aliens were driven to their knees by the crushing force, unable to move or fight back. Other crew members emerged from hiding and finished them off with mining tools. Jake had reached the ship's armory, where they kept emergency supplies. It wasn't much, but there were a few projectile weapons and some body armor. He armed himself with a shotgun and handed out the remaining weapons to his crew. "These aliens think they can just take what they want," he said, loading shells into his weapon. "They're about to learn that humans don't give up their freedom without a fight." The fighting was brutal and personal. The Zephyrians had superior weapons and armor, but the humans had something their scans had not detected: the will to fight for their home. Every crew member was fighting for their life, for their freedom, and for their shipmates. Commander Vextal watched the battle reports with growing alarm. He had sent over 60 soldiers to capture a simple cargo ship, and half of them were dead or wounded. The humans were using tactics that seemed insane, but they were working. "Sir," his tactical officer said, "perhaps we should withdraw and destroy the ship from a distance." "No," Vextal replied. "These humans have embarrassed the Zephyrian Empire. They will be taken alive for interrogation. Send in the heavy assault troops." But Amy Watson had been listening to the Zephyrian communications. Her equipment couldn't translate their language perfectly, but she understood enough to know that more soldiers were coming. "Captain," she called over the intercom, "I'm picking up chatter from the Dreadnought. They're sending in their elite troops. Heavy armor, better weapons." Jake reloaded his shotgun and checked his ammunition. They had been fighting for hours, and his crew was exhausted, but they were still free, still fighting, still human. "Then we'll give them a fight they'll never forget," he said. "Amy, I need you to send that distress signal again. Maybe somebody out there is listening." "Already on it, Captain." "Broadcasting on all frequencies." Jake looked around at his crew. They were battered and tired, but their eyes still held the fire of defiance. The Zephyrians had scanned their ship and seen only what they wanted to see. They had missed the most important thing about humans. They never gave up. The real test was about to begin. The distress signal from the Aurora's Pride had been broadcasting for 4 hours when it finally reached the right ears. Captain Ben Torres was finishing his patrol route in the border regions when his communications officer picked up the desperate message. "Captain, I'm getting a distress call from a human cargo ship," Lieutenant Kate Murphy reported from her station aboard the patrol vessel Frontier Guardian. "They're under attack by a Zephyrian dreadnought at the Kepler Junction." Ben Torres was a veteran of the border wars, and he knew what Zephyrian attacks meant. The aliens rarely left survivors, and they had little respect for human life. "How far away are we?" 3 hours at maximum speed, sir." Ben looked at his tactical display. The Frontier Guardian was a small patrol ship with light weapons and thin armor. Going up against a Zephyrian dreadnought would be suicide. But the distress call had come from humans, and that changed everything. "Set course for Kepler Junction, maximum speed," he ordered. "And send out a general call for assistance. Any human ships in the area." The call went out on emergency frequencies, and within minutes, 2 responses came back. The mining ships Iron Will and Stellar Harvester were in the area, hauling or from the asteroid belt. Their captains, Pete Collins and Maria Santos, had heard the distress call and were already changing course. "This is Captain Collins of the Iron Will," came the gruff voice over the radio. "We're 2 hours out from Kepler Junction." "What's the situation?" "Zephyrian dreadnought attacking a cargo ship," Ben replied. "It's not going to be pretty." Then we better get there fast," said Maria Santos from the Stellar Harvester. "No human ship fights alone if we can help it." The 3 ships raced through space toward the battle, their crews preparing for a fight they were unlikely to win. The Frontier Guardian had some weapons, but the 2 mining ships were essentially unarmed. Against a Zephyrian dreadnought, they would be outgunned and outmatched, but they were human. And humans had a rule that was older than space travel. You never abandon your own dot at the Kepler Junction. The battle aboard the Aurora's Pride was reaching a critical point. The Zephyrian elite troops had boarded the ship, and they were pushing the human defenders back corridor by corridor. These soldiers were bigger and stronger than the first wave. With better armor and more powerful weapons. Jake Morrison had been wounded in the fighting. A burn across his left arm from a Zephyrian energy weapon, but he was still on his feet, still fighting, still leading his crew. They had retreated to the central section of the ship, using the narrow corridors to limit the aliens' numerical advantage. "Danny, how are we doing on explosives?" Jake asked over the intercom. "Running low, Captain," came the reply from somewhere in the maintenance tunnels. "I've got maybe 6 charges left, and then we're down to hand weapons." Lisa Carter had taken a position in the ship's galley, using the kitchen equipment as weapons. She had discovered that the food processor could launch metal fragments at high speed, turning it into a crude but effective gun. The Zephyrians had not expected to face flying kitchen utensils. "Amy, any word from that distress signal?" Lisa asked. "Still broadcasting, but no response yet," Amy replied from the bridge. She was the only one still at her station, keeping the ship's systems running while the battle raged around her. The Zephyrian elite troops were methodical and professional. They advanced slowly, using their superior equipment to clear each room. But the humans continued to surprise them with improvised weapons and desperate tactics. Commander Vextal was growing impatient. His elite troops were taking casualties from enemies who should have been easy to defeat. The humans were using their ship like a weapon, turning every system against the boarders. "Status report," he demanded. "We have secured 60% of the ship," his squad leader reported. "But the humans are fighting from prepared positions. They know every hiding place, every shortcut. It's like fighting ghosts." They are cargo haulers," Vextal said with frustration. "How are they resisting trained soldiers?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The Frontier Guardian dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler Junction, followed closely by the 2 mining ships. Ben Torres took one look at the massive Zephyrian dreadnought and knew he was outclassed. But he had come too far to turn back now. "This is Captain Ben Torres of the human patrol ship Frontier Guardian," he broadcast on all frequencies. "Release the Aurora's Pride immediately or face the consequences." Commander Vextel's laughter echoed across the radio. "You threaten me with a single patrol ship? Your scans must be malfunctioning if you think you can challenge a Zephyrian dreadnought." "I'm not alone," Ben replied. "And humans stick together." The Iron Will and Stellar Harvester moved into position alongside the Frontier Guardian. Pete Collins and Maria Santos had been mining asteroids for 20 years, and they knew how to handle heavy machinery in dangerous situations. "Maria, you still got those mining charges in your cargo hold?" Pete asked over the radio. 50 tons of the best explosives money can buy," she replied. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we show these aliens what happens when they mess with human ships." The 3 human vessels were tiny compared to the Zephyrian dreadnought, but they had something the aliens didn't understand. They were fighting for each other. The patrol ship began making attack runs on the dreadnought, using its speed and maneuverability to stay out of range of the heavy weapons. The mining ships moved in from different angles, using their massive cargo holds as battering rams. They were slow and clumsy, but they were also incredibly tough. Built to survive in asteroid fields, they could take punishment that would destroy a warship. Commander Vextel found himself fighting on 2 fronts. His boarding parties were still trying to capture the cargo ship, while his dreadnought was under attack by 3 human vessels that refused to give up. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the human mining ships are loaded with explosives. If they ram us, the damage could be severe." "Then destroy them," Vextel ordered. "Show them the power of the Zephyrian Empire." But the humans were not fighting like a disciplined military force. They were fighting like a pack of wild animals, coordinating their attacks with deadly precision. The patrol ship would dart in to distract the dreadnought's weapons, while the mining ships moved into position for ramming attacks. Amy Watson, still at her station aboard the Aurora's Pride, was monitoring the battle outside. She had managed to establish communication with the rescue ships, and she was providing them with technical information about the Zephyrian dreadnought. "Captain Torres, the dreadnought's shield generators are located near the engine section," she reported. "If you can hit them with concentrated fire, you might be able to bring down their defenses." "Copy that, Aurora's Pride. We're going to try something crazy." The 3 human ships formed up in a tight formation, with the patrol ship leading and the mining ships following. They charged straight at the dreadnought, ignoring the heavy weapons fire that filled the space around them. The Frontier Guardian fired everything it had at the shield generators, while the 2 mining ships prepared for impact. Pete Collins and Maria Santos had filled their cargo holds with every explosive they could find, turning their ships into massive bombs. "For the Aurora's Pride?" Pete shouted over the radio as his ship slammed into the dreadnought's hull. The explosion lit up. "Space like a new star?" The Iron Will's cargo of mining charges detonated on contact, blowing a hole in the Zephyrian ship's armor. The Stellar Harvester followed seconds later, its own cargo exploding in a chain reaction that sent shockwaves through both ships. Commander Vextel felt his ship shudder under the impact. Damage reports flooded in from all sections. The humans had turned their mining ships into weapons, using the same explosives they used to blast asteroids to damage his dreadnought. "Sir, we have hull breaches on multiple decks," his damage control officer reported. "Shield generators are offline, and we're losing atmosphere." Vextel stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 3 small human ships had damaged his mighty dreadnought. It was impossible, yet it was happening. The humans were not fighting like civilized beings. They were fighting like barbarians, using suicide tactics and improvised weapons. But they were winning, and aboard the Aurora's Pride, Jake Morrison and his crew heard the explosions and knew that help had arrived. They were no longer alone in their fight against the Zephyrian Empire. The pack had come to defend their own. The explosions from the mining ships had damaged the Zephyrian dreadnought, but Commander Vextel was far from defeated. His ship was wounded but still functional, and he had hundreds of soldiers aboard. The human rescue attempt had surprised him, but it would not save them. Recall all boarding parties, he ordered. We will destroy these ships and be done with this embarrassment. But aboard the Aurora's Pride, Danny Rodriguez had been thinking. The engineer had spent the last hour crawling through the ship's maintenance tunnels, studying the damage from the Zephyrian weapons. He had an idea that was either brilliant or completely insane. "Captain," Danny's voice came over the intercom. "I need to talk to you. Private channel." Jake Morrison was reloading his shotgun when the call came through. His arm was still bleeding from the energy weapon burn, but he could still fight. "What is it, Danny?" "I can turn our ship into a bomb," Danny said quietly. "Our cargo hold is full of mining equipment and explosives. If I can rig it right, we could take that dreadnought with us." Jake felt his blood turn cold. "Danny, that's a suicide mission." "Maybe not for everyone," Danny replied. "The rescue ships could take most of the crew. But somebody has to stay behind to pilot the ship and make sure it hits the target." Jake closed his eyes, knowing what Danny was suggesting. The Aurora's Pride was dying anyway. The Zephyrians had damaged too many systems, and the ship would never fly again. But they could make their death count for something. "How long do you need?" Jake asked. "Give me 30 minutes to rig the charges. Then we evacuate everyone except the pilot." Jake opened a channel to the rescue ships. "Captain?" "Torres, this is Jake Morrison. We need immediate evacuation for 11 crew members." "What about you, Captain?" Ben Torres replied from the Frontier Guardian. "Somebody has to stay with the ship," Jake said simply. There was a long pause. "Understood, Captain." "We'll get your people out." Amy Watson had been listening to the conversation from the bridge. She stood up from her station and walked to where Jake was standing. "Captain, I'm staying too. Amy, you don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," she said firmly. "This is my ship too. And you're going to need someone to handle communications and navigation for the final run." Lisa Carter appeared in the corridor, her plasma torch still smoking from recent fighting. "If you two are staying, then so am I. Someone has to watch your backs." Jake looked at his officers, these people who had become his family during years of traveling through space together. "The ship only needs one pilot." "And a good crew," Lisa said with a sad smile. "We've come this far together, Captain." "We're not splitting up now." The evacuation began immediately. The Frontier Guardian docked with the Aurora's Pride, and the remaining crew members began transferring to the patrol ship. They moved quickly but carefully. Avoiding the sections where Zephyrian soldiers were still fighting, Danny worked frantically in the cargo hold, connecting explosive charges to the ship's power systems. He had turned the entire forward section of the Aurora's Pride into a massive bomb. When it detonated, the explosion would be powerful enough to crack the hull of the Zephyrian dreadnought. "Charges are set," he reported to Jake. "When we hit their reactor core, both ships will be vaporized." Commander Vextal watched the human evacuation with satisfaction. The cargo ship was clearly disabled, and soon he would have prisoners to interrogate. He would learn what made these humans so difficult to defeat. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the damaged human ship is moving toward us under emergency power." Vextal looked at his display. The Aurora's Pride was indeed moving, but slowly and clumsily. "They are trying to ram us." "How primitive." "Destroy them before they get close." But the other human ships were not going to let that happen. The Frontier Guardian and the surviving mining ship, Stellar Harvester, moved to intercept the dreadnought's weapons fire. They threw themselves between the Aurora's Pride and the alien guns, taking hit after hit to protect the cargo ship. Captain Ben Torres gritted his teeth as his ship shook under enemy fire. "All power to forward shields. We have to give them time to reach the target." Maria Santos in the Stellar Harvester was using her mining ship like a shield, its heavy armor absorbing punishment that would have destroyed a warship. "Come on, you ugly alien bastards, is that the best you can do?" Jake Morrison sat in the captain's chair of the Aurora's Pride for the last time. Amy was at the navigation station, plotting their course toward the dreadnought's reactor core. Lisa was at the weapons station, though they had no weapons left except the ship itself. "Amy, open a channel to the Zephyrian ship," Jake ordered. "Channel open, Captain." Jake stood up and faced the main view screen, where the image of Commander Vextall appeared. The alien commander looked confident, as if he had already won the battle. "Commander Vextall," Jake said, his voice calm and steady, "you scanned our ship and saw only what you wanted to see. You saw weak cargo haulers, not the descendants of survivors who crossed the void between stars. You saw simple merchants, not the children of warriors who refused to yield to any threat." Vextall's reptilian features twisted in confusion. "What are you trying to say, human?" "I'm saying you chose the wrong species to anger," Jake replied. "You thought we were weak because we carry cargo instead of weapons. You thought we were cowards because we tried to talk instead of fight. But you missed the most important thing about humans. And what is that?" Jake smiled grimly. "We never give up, and we never abandon our own." The Aurora's pride was picking up speed now, its emergency engines pushing the damaged ship toward the dreadnought. Vextall suddenly realized what the humans were planning. "They are going to ram us," he said to his tactical officer. "All weapons, destroy that ship now," but it was too late. The human rescue ships had bought Jake the time he needed. The Aurora's pride was too close to stop, and its hull was packed with enough explosives to destroy both vessels. "Amy, Lisa," Jake said quietly, "it's been an honor serving with you." "The honor was ours, Captain," Amy replied, tears in her eyes. "See you on the other side," Lisa added. The Aurora's pride struck the Zephyrian dreadnought just forward of the reactor core. For a moment there was silence. Then Danny's carefully placed charges detonated in a chain reaction that lit up the darkness of space. The explosion was visible from light years away. Both ships were vaporized instantly, their atoms scattered across the void. Jake Morrison and his crew died as they had lived, fighting for their freedom and protecting their own. Commander Vextall's final thought was a grudging recognition that the Zephyrians had completely misunderstood their enemy. The humans weren't weak. They were simply different, and that difference made them far more dangerous than any scan could reveal. The surviving human ships returned to the colonies, carrying word of the sacrifice of the Aurora's pride. The story spread quickly through human space, becoming a legend that inspired resistance against alien aggression. The Zephyrian Empire, upon learning of the fate of their dreadnought, began to reassess their understanding of humanity. They had thought humans were just another species to be conquered, but the sacrifice of Jake Morrison and his crew suggested something far more troubling. Humans might be the kind of species that became more dangerous when threatened, not less. They fought with creativity and desperation, using anything as a weapon and never surrendering as long as they drew breath. They came to the aid of their own kind, even when facing impossible odds. The Zephyrians had scanned the human ship and seen primitives with basic technology. They had missed the warriors hiding behind the facade of peaceful traders. They had chosen the wrong species to anger, and they would spend the rest of the war learning just how wrong they had been. In the end, the Aurora's pride had been just a cargo ship with a crew of 12 ordinary humans, but they had shown the galaxy that there was nothing ordinary about the human spirit. And sometimes that was enough to change the course of history.